Under the leadership of people like Armando Zamora, who is here with us, we introduced very important reforms in the administration and in the operation of the energy sector in my country. First, we created the National Agency for Hydrocarbons. The law empowered this agency and ordered this agency to give investors the same treatment, regardless they were domestic or foreigners, state-owned corporations, mixed or private-owned corporations. It was very important. Before that, Ecopetrol had the power to assign contracts. And people said, we cannot trust because Ecopetrol is a player, and we are, and we cannot understand that one of the players has the right to assign the contracts. Therefore, the creation of the agency was very important for my country to get confidence from the international community and from the domestic community. Second, the reform in Ecopetrol. We introduced three main reforms in Ecopetrol. First, the labor reform. Second, the pension reform. These two were quite difficult because we had to eliminate many privileges. And I said to my fellow Colombians, we have two options. If we do not reform Ecopetrol, Ecopetrol will go to bankruptcy. If we want to have a lasting Ecopetrol forever, we need to introduce these reforms in Ecopetrol. It was not an easy task, because I have to recognize that Ecopetrol was influenced by the participation of communist trade unions. Many of them were friends of terrorist guerrillas, and they opposed to this kind of reforms. However, we won. It took a long time. It took 3 years in court, in the Supreme Court of Justice. It was a very long legal dispute with the unions and with some political parties. But at the end, we won. And today, everyone in Colombia accepts that the reform was necessary for Ecopetrol to be a lasting corporation, to be a long-term corporation. And the third reform was to open Ecopetrol for having private shareholders. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was national senator, I thought it was impossible to open Ecopetrol. At the beginning of the administration, I had the same thought. I said to myself, in Latin America, what we see is the advancement of the Chavez theory, that is fighting, is eliminating every private presence, with the exception of Petrobras in Brazil. That was a great example for us, and I want to greet Mr. Gabrieli, who is here with us this morning. For my country, politically speaking, to open Ecopetrol, it did look impossible before we began to implement this policy. Every day, I explain to my fellow Colombians, we are not going to sell Ecopetrol. We are going to capitalize Ecopetrol. The value of Ecopetrol is here, and we are going to add more value. This is the state-owned value, and this will be the private sector participation. We are not going to sell the state-owned participation to private investors. We are going to invite private investors to come and to add value to Ecopetrol. And I repeat it once and again, at morning, at noon, at night, this explanation to my fellow Colombians in very simple terms. The first time I studied how to create a vision in one corporation, it was awful for me because it was very complicated. But the best book I read 25 years ago, this book said, make hard things simpler. And we spoke in the most simple terms. And we dispel all the doubts that my fellow Colombians expressed to us in this dialogue. And finally, we enacted the law, allowing Ecopetrol for having up to 20% of private investors. With one specific rule, the state will preserve 80%, but the corporation has to be managed with private rules. It has been very important. Let me share with you some results. Before the reforms, Ecopetrol invested $500 million per year. In the last 3 years, this corporation is investing in between 10 and 13 billion per year. Before our reforms, Ecopetrol was worth 8 billion. Now in the stock market, Ecopetrol is worth over 120 billion. Ecopetrol represents today, in value, much more the public debt in my country. And I have explained to the leftist people, you criticize my government a lot. You said that my government was going to dismantle the state sector, the governmental sector. But you see, now the state-owned stock in Ecopetrol is equal, or even it has much more value than the public debt of my country. Colombia was going to lose the self-sufficiency in oil production. When our administration began, we were said, be prepared, because for the year 2008, you have to import oil. And I said, oh my God, we have no resources. What we are going to do? Colombia, for domestic needs, requires 280,000 barrels per day. And we were going to produce less than that for the year 2008. At this moment, my country produces 1 million barrels per day. And we consider that if things continue doing well, my country could reach 2 million barrels per day.